Egypt's President Abdel-Fattah El-Sisi says the government is trying to deal with the current round of price hikes in the private market by creating a parallel commodity market, which will not be, in his words, based on excessive profits, end of quote. Now, Mr. El-Sisi also says he aims to implement policies to regulate the market without breaking the law in order to lessen the suffering of the Egyptian people. It's an interesting story, this. Let's dig a little deeper and find out exactly what the authorities are trying to achieve. Adel Mahouki joins me now live from Cairo with a lot more data on this story. Adel, set the stage here for us. What kind of goods and services will be dealt with in this parallel market, and how will it work?
Well, basically what the president is looking for or talking about are here strategic goods. So we're talking about sugar, rice, margarine, cooking oil, and of course other animal proteins. And these are the main products that the government already distributes by supply cards to about 20 million families here. And what he means is that the government, and I'm quoting the president here, he said that he wants to be in the market as a state. So we're not talking about price control, we're not talking about inspections, we're talking about clearly a presence of the state with its own outlets in the market.
Indeed. So does that by extension therefore mean that private companies will not be allowed to deal in any way, shape or form in this market?
Well, obviously from what the president has been mentioning, yes, he has described the liberal market or the open market as a extortionist profiters. They want to make the maximum profit, but what he wants to do, and that was during his interview with state newspapers yesterday, he said clearly that what he wants to do is create a model that does not depend on profit. It's not a profit-driven model. It's basically to provide goods to the Egyptian people and end the shortages in these goods. So that's what he's trying to do, and it seems from the interview, of course there has not been further elaborations on that yet. At least the ministers of supply and finance have not yet commented or give detailed explains of what they intend to do. But this is what the president has clarified during that interview.
But doesn't this then just create the age-old problem of arbitrage? What's to stop someone from, say, walking into one of these state-run outlets, buying a lot of subsidized, as it were, rice, and then reselling it at a much higher price within the country or outside the country altogether?
Well, definitely, Rama, when there are two prices for the same product, there's always room for corruption and extortionists to make use of that. Whoever it will be dealing in the state side might be lured to smuggle some of these products and make some money in his pocket. So yes, we're talking that the same temptations and the same circumstances that has been fueling the corruption in the subsidies system here in Egypt might still persist, unless the government, of course, will develop a new system, which they say they have been trying to form, restructuring the supply card system, decreasing the number of beneficiaries, and limiting the number of items sold per card per day or per certain period, depends on what system they want to use. That might be a way around it, but it still hasn't been proven to be very successful in the past.
Indeed. The president says he wants to essentially lower the cost of living for citizens here. Why not just do that by lowering taxes or making it easier for private companies to actually just do business in Egypt?
It's an excellent point, Rama. First of all, you know that the Egyptian government cannot actually afford to decrease its revenues, and therefore tax, VAT implementation, these are all structures or procedures that the government has been moving through to increase its earning, not to let it go. So basically, this might seem at this current stage for Egypt with a huge budget deficit could not be an option on the table. But at the same time, this is what the second point, and it's attracting foreign investments, open the market, ease the bureaucratic procedures that most investors have been complaining about here in Egypt. And this is what the president says they're working on. There has been a long wait for a one-window or one-stop shop law that should have eased the entire process of investment in Egypt. It has not seen the light yet. So this is the main challenge ahead for the government.
Indeed. One last question, Adel. It seems like Egypt's government has got a lot of balls up in the air at the moment. The VAT was introduced just at the end of last year. There's a pilot program now to track the consumption and sale of fuel. How does the establishment of this parallel market tie in to those other elements of reform that are taking place at the moment?
Well, it basically goes through the restructuring of the subsidies that the government has been trying to do, to give the subsidies to those who are really in need. But there is also one main challenge that the government must face, and that it has to cover the shortage. In his statement, the president said that they're planning to increase productivity, particularly when it comes to, for example, animal proteins. He said that within 1.5 years, Egypt intends to increase its livestock population by 1 million head. At least 200,000 of those will be in the coming few months before the holy month of Ramadan begins, which is the biggest consumption month in the Egyptian calendar. At the same time, they're working on having fish farms. He says that by the end of 2018, Egypt should have the 3 biggest fish farms in the region. So he is very hopeful about increasing the productivity, about taking all that within the government management and putting it toward that parallel market, and hopefully from the president's perspective, that would cover the gap, that would decrease the shortage, and hopefully keep those who are under the poverty line well secured, at least from the food security aspect.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for that. That's Adel Maghroubi, of course, live in Cairo.